Hi there, folks. This is episode 205 of the WP-Tonic Roundtable Show. We've got some fantastic panelists this episode, and we've got some fantastic topics, folks. But first of all, I'm going to let my panel introduce themselves. As always, ladies first. Go on, Sally, introduce yourself to the listeners.
Sure. I'm Sally Getch. My business is WP Fangirl. I do mostly Genesis theme development, and I'm also organizer of the East Bay WordPress meetup in Oakland, California. And you can join us this weekend if you happen to live there.
Sounds good to me. Introduce yourself, Kim.
I'm Kim Shivler. My business is White Glove Web Training. I teach basic WordPress and also how to build out learning platforms and online courses.
I'm going to ask Adam to introduce himself.
Sure. My name is Adam from WPCrafter.com, which is the largest resource on YouTube for video training about WordPress. It's a fun place to be. You should go check it out and subscribe.
True words never said. And Morton, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey, I'm Morton. I'm a senior staff instructor at lynda.com and LinkedIn Learning. I'm just back from WordCamp Europe.
Yes, he's been Frenched up, folks. John, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I am John Locke. My business is Lockdown Design, providing SEO and custom WordPress theme development for mid-sized businesses with a dedicated marketing department. And you, my beloved co-host, Jonathan.
I just love that, John. I'm the founder of WP-Tonic. We're a service maintenance company. We're your trusted WordPress partner. And let's go into the stories first, And we're going to, I think I found some decent stories this week. I'll leave the panel to decide.
It was good news week, yeah.
Yeah. WooCommerce drops the 50% renewal discount on subscriptions. Shock horror. I keep saying that too often, really. I think I said
it's your catchphrase.
I said it 5 times last week. I'm going to have to cut back. Sally, what do you think of this?
Well, I think this is it seems to be what happens in the WordPress community every time something costs money. I mean, my impression is they did a very poor job of communicating it, and most clients I've worked with are willing to accept price increases and understand, but as long as I explain why and give them some advance notice and that kind of thing, it's, and I think that particularly with an e-commerce product, you're using this to make money. Therefore, you should expect to pay money for it. And so, if after evaluating the state of Woo, Automatic realized, they need to change the pricing structure in order to maintain profitability, then that's what they needed to do. And really the only issue is, how well this was communicated and how well existing customers were transferred. And sometimes when you get, like my favorite stock photo place was bought out by Adobe. And I got a year of Adobe at the price that I was paying for the other thing, then Adobe occurs, or then suddenly I'm paying 3 times as much because Adobe, but they provided a little transition period to ease people into it. And something like that might have been nice to do. But I think a lot of the most outraged people seem to, have this idea that, because WordPress is open source, everything needs to be cheap or free.
Yeah, that's the impression I get. What do you think, Adam?
Well, I think it's going to backfire, but not for the reason why most people think it's going to backfire. A lot of people think, oh, the price increase, people are going to balk at that. But the way I see it is now someone has zero incentive to actually pay the renewal, because why would you pay the renewal? The plugin's working. You don't need support. everything's fine. Why even renew? People will renew because they're given an incentive to renew. And this incentive is, it's a discounted price. And if they don't renew within a period of time, now they got to repurchase it at the normal price. But if the plugin's still going to work, you're pretty stable with your environment. You don't need an update. There is no security thing that just was released. Why on earth would you renew anyway? I mean, wouldn't you just wait a little bit until maybe you needed support? So say it expires in January and it's summer and you're running into problems. Well, that's when I'll renew. And then there's that 6 months period where you didn't have the latest update or something like that. So, but I definitely, looking forward to seeing what happens if they ever did share like any public information, which they probably wouldn't because it's public, because it's a large corporation. I doubt they're going to share it, but I would be very interested to see what happens with the renewal because of the issue that I just brought up. And I've actually had that same discussion with other developers of products where they give you 0 discount, and what they've done, because they don't get the renewals, they actually lock you out of the plugin. One of the top membership plugins, MemberPress, does this. If you don't renew, they give you 0 renewal discount. There's no incentive to renew, but what the incentive they built in is you can't use the plugin anymore. You can't add or take away anything to it if you don't renew. I just don't see why I would renew something unless there's a security update.
That's why I love you. Do you just say it as you feel? Kim, what do you think?
Well, I agree with Sally. I think it was just maybe not communicated, but if they've got to do it. But I hadn't actually thought of Adam's point, and I do think that people will do that. They'll wait until there's a major update that they need to update in order to do it. I think some people will do that. But overall, I think all of us on this panel have been in agreement that some of the attitude is just the craziness in the WordPress community that everyone thinks everything should be free. And as business people, we know that just doesn't work.
No. What about you, Moulton? What did you think? Is he there?
There, I just had to unmute myself. Yeah, there's this ridiculous notion that things should be free, which is nonsense. It is in large part exists because of us, the community. We keep saying stuff like that, which makes no sense. Like, we keep telling people that WordPress is cheap and WordPress is free and you can do all this stuff and you don't need to pay for it. The question of why people would keep updating even though the price is full price is not really, in any other context, that wouldn't be a question to ask. The only reason why it's a question to ask is because we keep saying that things should be free and cheap. The reality is the people that rely on WooCommerce also rely on WooCommerce being up to date and relies on support. And any person who has a WooCommerce site has every incentive to keep it up to date and keep paying that licensing fee. Because the licensing fee, if you can't afford to pay that licensing fee, your e-commerce store is not an e-commerce store. It's just a big box of wasted money, right? So any serious business that uses WooCommerce in a serious way will pay this fee unless they're being explicitly told by their developer or designer that they shouldn't, which would be irresponsible from that perspective. I think this whole notion of getting people to renew by reducing the price by 50% thing is something that it's kind of a panic move on behalf of a company. Like, you don't see big companies do this. It's only small companies who are like trying to keep people engaged and are worried that people won't pay for it. So I don't think, like, if you looked at this from another perspective, this whole conversation is ridiculous. The only reason why we're having it is because of this ridiculous notion within our community that things should be free or cheap, which is something we should do away with anyway. I mean, the reality is when we underprice our products, they look like garbage. So we shouldn't be doing that. Of course, people are going to abandon ship immediately because it's more expensive. But in the long run, I don't think this has a negative impact on anything.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you and Adam, because I see it as a kind of, I've lost the word I was going to use. The feeling, I think a lot of this is down to the WordPress community and the people that started WordPress and blah, blah, blah. Expectations, that was the word I was looking for. I think the expectation around WordPress has been set. And so people feel that when something like this comes up, they feel that they're being cheated in a way, because they've been told that, like what you've said, Morton, it's free, it's this, it's that. It's like they've been sold like what Adam is pointing out, they've been sold a message, and then they've been told the message is totally different. What do you think, John? Do you think I'm just rabbiting, or do you think I'm on to something there?
Well, I agree with Morton on this, and I have several clients that have WooCommerce shops, and some of them make a lot of money. Some of them make a little tiny amount of money. Here's the thing. The people complaining about the price increase, I have WooCommerce subscriptions. I subscribe to, different plugins like Gravity Forms and Migrate Database Pro and all these things. And when the renewal comes up, I always forget that there is a discount. I never ever counted on the discount being there. If that's like your make or break for using a plugin, then perhaps you should charge more or get a different pricing model, because that is how software as a service apps operate. You don't get a discount on Netflix or anything else that you subscribe to for using it for over a year. So neither should, plugins. And you're seeing this in the plugin ecosystem in WordPress, EDD. Same thing. People had a backlash for a minute, and then they're, what are you going to do? The same thing. Migrate Database Pro is going up. But here's the thing, that those fees pay for the support that you're receiving from the plugin. And like Morton was saying, the high-end clients and the high-end agencies, they have those costs already built into their price. Serious companies that are using WooCommerce or any other plugin, they have those costs allocated already. So if you're a smaller agency or a freelancer that's relying on WooCommerce and you're outraged that they didn't tell you, I feel you on that. They should have handled the announcement of the price increase better. But you should anticipate those things costing the same price that you paid for them initially each year, and put that into your cost, put that into your pricing.
Yeah, I have to say, I got about 5 emails from Migrate DB Pro saying, our price is going up, buy now before the price goes up. So they were good about communicating it.
They certainly were. Well, I think we've covered that story. Let's go on to the next story, the Gutenberg and Matt Cromwell's observations. Who to start with? I have no idea. Let's start with John. What did you think of it, John?
Come back to me.
All right,
yeah,
that's fine.
Let's
start with Kim then. What do you think, Kim?
Well, I couldn't verify it or not. I read it and I said, okay, let me put the plugin in and test it to see if I'm finding the same things.
Oh, that's very impressive, Kim.
I didn't know if it was accurate. And I don't know if it was bugs or my install or what. It's, it's just one of my test installs. But I kept having, I got what he was saying about the simplicity and this and that. But I kept having issues if I edited it, then went back into the post, saved it and went back in to edit it again. Things were disappearing right and left. So I was like, maybe it's not ready for prime time yet, at least not for me. But also for the other thing I noticed, and my perspective is a lot of times different because so much of my audience are the super beginners, the 70-year-olds who really rely on the visual editor. The Tiny MCE advanced options don't show. So you're just limited to their bold justification. Like there's 4 things you have there. And so for my audience, that's going to be too big of a hurdle for them.
Yes. What did you think, Moulton?
Sorry, you dropped out in the beginning. We're talking Gutenberg here?
Yes, we're talking about the Gutenberg. Yes, Moulton.
Do we have 8 hours to this?
No, we haven't. We got about 15 to 20 minutes.
So Gutenberg is a solution begging a problem in a very real sense. This stems from Matt's comment at WordCamp San Francisco, like 2013, 2014, about WordPress becoming a block-based system. It has been fast-tracked through a development process that lacked any kind of user research, any kind of personas, any kind of user journeys, anything like that. It has yet to prove any validity within the WordPress ecosystem, and it's profoundly confusing on a user experience level. The accessibility is non-existent at the moment. It adds a level of complexity to content production, which is absurdly high, and shifts focus onto really obscure little things. Like if you open the content editor, there's an enormous section for embeds, which is something that very few people use. Now, this sounds like I absolutely hate the idea of.
Well, it does sound you're a big fan of it, actually, Walter.
I think the idea of Gutenberg is a good one. This idea that you can create blocks within your content and then say, like, this block is a thing that's going to go next to another thing, or this is going to be like a split content thing, or this is going to be a full width thing, or whatever. The problem is it's presented in the context of the content editor. That's not where it belongs. It belongs in the context of the entire site, which is eventually where it's going to go. Like Gutenberg is the first step in a process that will eventually allow you to control the entire view of any WordPress content. So you should be able to, drag your sidebars around and move the header and all that stuff. The problem is it's introduced in the content editor where it does not belong, because people who create content what they want is as little obstruction as possible to get where they want to go. And this introduces an enormous level of obstruction to everything you're trying to do. And I think what the project suffers from is the lack of a user persona, the lack of any kind of journey mapping. So to figure out how do people write content and how do they produce the content and when do they edit it and what do they do in terms of moving content around. And because of that, there's a bunch of features in Gutenberg that have been added that have no real use case aside from this is really neat. Like, for instance, the ability for you to move paragraphs up and down with an arrow is absurd. No one does that in editing. That's not something people do. That's something that if you might do it if you're working in Illustrator and you're making a poster, but in the context of writing content for the web, that is not a feasible situation that people would want to do at any time. And yes, you could say that, well, if it's an image, then it's different. But sure, but then it should be a feature for the image. It shouldn't be a feature for every single piece of content. Because what ends up happening is you have these bizarre situations where if you hit the tab key while you're editing content, what do you expect happens? Like if you're writing a paragraph, blah, 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 and then you hit the tab key, what happens?
You should tab over. You should tab over within the text so that as like an indent type of tab. You
indent, right? Yeah. No, that doesn't happen here. When you tab, you move to the next block, right? Because that's how you navigate blocks. That little example belies a much bigger problem, which is there's a new layer of abstraction added to the content editor now, which is the block layer, where each block has its own little nav thing with its own little function that you can do. And what ends up happening is you have to shift in and out of this layer it's like, now I'm managing the blocks. Now I'm managing the content. Now I'm actually managing the blocks again. And it becomes very, very complex to do something that should be dead simple. So, and this is being shipped into core. Like, there's no question about it. This is going to end up in core probably within the year. And that means every single person who uses WordPress internationally will have to come to terms with this thing. And it also means it needs to be beta tested and commented on and picked apart and rebuilt again by every single person who has a vested interest in WordPress. Because if it shipped the way it is now into WordPress core, it would kill WordPress.
Well, there we go. What did you think of it, Adam?
Well, in the first news segment, we talked about how there's this misnomer that WordPress is cheap. And in this news story, we need to talk about a different misnomer, which is WordPress is easy. Because WordPress is not easy at all. Now, for us, we're in an echo chamber. It's easy for us, right? We know exactly where to go for everything. But for the other, what would it be, 72% of market share that WordPress doesn't have, WordPress is not easy. Now, I'm not saying these other platforms are easy, but I know for darn sure, someone new to WordPress, WordPress is not easy. Like, where do I go to change the menu? And why can't I just do that here or that? And there's all these problems with usability, in my opinion, with WordPress. Now, on to Gutenberg. Gutenberg is, they're trying to make some things easier. I mean, I'm not so clear on what the end goal is with the Gutenberg personally.
I don't think they are.
I don't think they are. What would be a perfect world for me would be to look at the front end of my website, click somewhere, to click on the menu, and now I can edit the menu. But visually from the front end, right? You get that in the customizer. But you need to first know to go to the customizer, but do I go to appearance and menus? And the same thing goes with the content. You know, this is something that page builders are trying to solve, where people say, why can't I just make that header in my page builder? And they're trying to solve that, and that's the direction that that's going. But you know, it's kind of hard to talk about where Gutenberg is today, because it's going to be something totally different by the time it ships. And I did play with it, and I think it's neat. But there was an article yesterday that I think it was last night, Chris Lemma put out, and you know, he had an interesting opinion on it, and he was right. And I think Mortensen was Morton or Mortensen. I'm sorry, buddy, Morton. Mortensen. That's like a butler's name. Okay, Morton. Anyways, when I was a kid, I used to watch Mr. Belvedere. Anyways, you'd have to be probably in your 40s to know what the heck that is. The point was, we need to get to the point where you can look at the front end of your website and just do everything in an intuitive way on the front end, whether it's adding content, building your pages, editing your navigation menu. We essentially need to get to that point. And Gutenberg, I think their intention isn't making it for us, isn't making it for the 28% of websites. They're making it for the 72% of websites that they want to capture. And I don't necessarily know that it's going to do it as it is today. I would like a more comprehensive solution, but I don't even know, some of you more experienced developers in this group, I don't even know if that's really possible, because you've got WordPress, that was that reverse compatibility. What's the proper phrase for it? Where they've got to make it so it works for everybody. They can't have like a cutoff. And this is the same problem you have with the very popular page builder Divi. They have to support the last 5-10 years of users and versions and make it upgrade compatible. So they're really, I think they're in a tough spot. I think they're in a tough spot on how do they get that other 72%. And that's what it boils down to in my mind.
Yeah. So, Sally, what did you think?
Okay, so I tested Gutenberg when they had the very first prototype out, and at that point it was actually showing you editing from the front end of the site. And what was confusing about that was there was nothing to indicate you were an editor. Plus, of course, half the stuff, you know, didn't even begin to work. But I liked the experience. I haven't had a chance to install the plugin, but I do get the impression that that technically really it should be described as pre-beta. And a lot of it just isn't working yet. And, you know, we're having a contributor day at our meetup in August, and I'm going to encourage the people who, you know, I'm going to encourage people that testing this, you know, on a clean install could be a very good way to contribute, because we do need feedback from from everyone. I think Chris Lemma had a good point, is like, which problem is this trying to solve? That hearing people talk about it, I expected something that was, more of a page builder, more of the let's compete with Squarespace and Wix. And what I found was something that seemed more, let's compete with the writing experience in Medium. And
can I sorry to be rude, I don't presume mid-flow, but I just couldn't resist temptation. I think I've got to be honest, I think that's a little bit unfair, because Jackie and myself have, through a number of episodes, said that the actual doing basic editing in the present environment is not only extremely confusing for the average person, but it's really terrible. And I presume that this is what they're trying to fix with.
Well, that was my original impression, and we've definitely talked about how just using the visual editor is not very nice, and my sense was it would probably be a nicer experience than using the visual editor as it is, but there are issues with it. It's true. Like if I'm working in Microsoft Word, I don't move paragraphs by clicking arrows. I cut the paragraph and I insert the point, I insert the pointer up here and I paste it. And, there are no intuitive interfaces. There are only familiar interfaces. And people who are editing content generally expect whatever they're working with to be like Microsoft Word or Google Docs or whatever they normally use to write content in. And this is where you run into a lot of issues, because print documents and web documents never worked the same, never were meant to work the same, but that mental leap is hard to make. So I think having an editor that, as an editor, just feels and looks better and lets you do at least a few things that you couldn't do previously is a good step to take. But we've already talked about marketing WordPress in inaccurate ways. That's claiming that it's cheap, claiming that it's easy, then finding ourselves in trouble because it's not really either of those things, and people object because not necessarily because it's hard so much as because they feel misled. And so I think, there's a lot that needs to be addressed before they can put this in core without, as Morton says, having a disaster that kills WordPress.
So, John, what did you think?
Basically, to sum up what everyone else said, they're focusing on the editing experience because they're looking at competitors like Wix and Squarespace, and they're trying to push it in that direction. In its current form, it really feels like a mashup between a page builder and Medium. And I definitely hope that the bugs are worked out, because in its current form, I do think that there's a bit of a learning curve here. It's definitely a lot different from.
You're so diplomatic,
yeah,
aren't you?
Yeah, sometimes.
Sometimes. Only with it. You're not diplomatic with me sometimes, but there we go. But I need control, don't I, John? Go on. Sorry.
No, that's pretty much like what everyone said. Like Morton said, this is definitely going to be in core by the end of the year. So we need to come to grips with it. Hopefully this will not end up being like when they tried to copy Tumblr and have the different post types or the post
formats. I was so annoyed when they pulled that.
Yeah,
I got a definite feeling we're going down that territory. Actually, John.
I think so too.
I think definitely.
That's my thoughts on it. Yeah.
I got to say, Morton, when you say what you were saying, I feel like a junior designer that's really think they've done a really fantastic design, and they've gone to their art director and he's pointed out why it's a piece of shit.
It's not a piece of shit. the problem is, just like with a lot of things that happen in the WordPress community, the open source community in general, is the process through which this came about went about it the wrong way. And I mean, I brought this up in the very beginning. I came to the project.
You really well listened to, weren't you? You got a great response, didn't you?
I came into the project very, very early on, and I said, where are the personas? Who are we designing this for? Who's going to use this? How do they use it currently? What are their challenges? What are their goals? This is a standard design process, right? You start by figuring out who is it you're targeting and what do they need? And then how do you solve their problems? And then you figure out, like, what is the journey they're currently taking through the application, and how can we take away some of the things that are problematic? And the response I got was, no, we're just working on a prototype for a type of interface. We're not really looking at how these people work yet. Then 5 months later is like, done, we're putting it in core. So that work was never done, right? Yeah. And of course now there's so much sunk cost in this that there's no way anyone's going to go back and say, no, we need to look at personas, and then oops, turns out no one wants this, right? So, and this is something that happens a lot in these types of projects, that people start working on something because they want to create some sort of feature, because technology. They don't think about the end user. And there's going to be dramatic pushback from this. I mean, people watch this and they're going to be like, oh, that guy's always talking crap, right? But the thing is, this is actually how you need to do these things. This isn't something we're building for like hundreds of people. This is something we're building for millions of people. And shipping this kind of breaking change to how WordPress works, it is going to impact a lot of people in a really bad way, simply because it is not considering how people really use it. And if you think about it, there's no easy way for a regular WordPress user to provide feedback about Gutenberg either. I mean, something may be in the works to solve that problem, but right now the answer is, oh, you want to have a comment? Go file a GitHub ticket, right? Which is like, the people who use WordPress, they're going to be, what is GitHub? Then they go to GitHub and they go, I don't understand. I need to sign up for an account here. What is going on? This is not a tenable way to receive any kind of actionable feedback. And like just that point I made before, this is actually a breaking change to WordPress. This is the first time WordPress will ship a breaking change, meaning there's something that is introduced here that actually breaks how WordPress normally works. It will result in theme developers have to build themes differently. It means the content that gets put into the WordPress database from Gutenberg forward will be different. So if you install Gutenberg, make some content, and then roll back to an earlier version, then your content doesn't work the way it's expected to work. So there's significant things that are happening here. And it's being shoehorned in a really odd way. It's the same with like Gutenberg, the prototype runs React. So therefore, React is going to end up in WordPress core. So there's no deliberate choice here about, like, should we use React or something else? It's Gutenberg runs React, and if we're going to put Gutenberg in core right now, we have to put in React too, because that's just what Gutenberg runs, right? So it's a really big challenge, because the intent is purely good, right? They want to make something better. And the ideas around the intent are also good. What's missing is the research. What's missing is the proof that this is actually something that works better. Because right now it's a technological solution without a defined problem. And it's very fancy, but it doesn't have data to back it at all.
All right, then. I think we've had a good discussion. I was going to go on to the third thing, but I think we need to get on to the main topic, actually. So we're going to go for our break, folks, and we'll be back, and we're going to be talking about the templates, template hierarchy, custom posts, all the good stuff about WordPress. We'll be back in a minute, folks. We're coming back, folks. We've had a really interesting discussion, a couple of WordPress news stories. Got a great panel here. I'm enjoying the discussion. We're on to the main subject of this episode, hierarchy of templates, custom posts. Sally, would you like to start with some comments about the main subject of today?
Sure. I mean, actually, the third news story ties into this perfectly.
It did. That's why I chose it.
It's about the the acquisition of WPHierarchy.com by WP Shout, who have updated it. I hadn't realized that it was out of date, but apparently it had confused some things, and now it is accurate again. If you need to go and see a visual example of the WordPress template hierarchy, which if you do theme development, you'd probably better go do if you haven't yet. It's interesting to me that one of the things that was recently introduced in WordPress was the ability to have, different templates for not just for pages, but for posts and for custom post types. And have a template drop down and do that. Now I thought, that was cool. I was sure it would be useful. I haven't had cause to use it yet, however. But I think it's nice. And yet at the same time, in a lot of the work I do, I find myself moving away from creating templates, particularly for plugins. I use the events calendar a lot. And, one of the annoying things is, they tell you, well, yeah, copy this, and this is true for WooCommerce also, copy these, templates over and edit them in a folder within your theme folder. And then every freaking time there is an update to the plugin, you have to do a diff merge on all of your templates with their templates. And this is really annoying. People pay me to do this for them, and I still don't like doing it. So what I have tended to do most of the time is if I need to modify any of those templates, I write myself a plugin and I use hooks to put in what needs to go where it is. And as long as there are enough hooks in the plugin to place things and enough filters to modify things, I don't actually have to recreate templates. And I find sometimes, well, maybe I need to do like 1 or 2 actual templates, but not as many. So there's not as much updating. I think it is good to know if you are new coming in and thinking about, building themes or even just modifying themes, looking at that interactive visual hierarchy to see, what's going to happen if you don't have a template for a particular post type or taxonomy archive or whatever it is, where is it going to go? Where are you going to end up with? And basically, everything kind of falls back to, to single.php, to singular.php, to index.php if it can't find anything else. And, knowing that helps you create it. And I remember it was kind of a big deal when you could actually use a slug for a taxonomy or a post type instead of just the ID, because, an ID might change. This is if you import and export stuff from a website versus copying your whole database, your IDs on your posts and pages will change. And surprise, anything that relies on your ID is not going to apply. So I think since we have plenty of other people here to chip something in, I'll stop there.
Well, that's great. But I think it's one of the really strengths of WordPress compared to some other content management system. It's an extensive template system, and it's really surprising how much, if you're getting into WordPress, how much you can do with the templates. And then you've got the custom posts, which is another whole area. Would you agree with that, Morten? And do you think it's one of the core strengths of WordPress in some ways?
A template hierarchy is fantastic. It is also something that is kind of going to die on its own. If you consider these 2 things that are happening, right? So you have the REST API, which ignores the template hierarchy entirely because you're just working with data. And then you have this Gutenberg project, which eventually will turn into a site-wide editor, which does away with the idea of templates altogether. The combination of those 2 is, I think, if there's no asteroid that kills everything and everything goes fine and there's no dramatic new developments in web technologies and we see 10 years into the future, if WordPress just develops on a linear line, there will be no template hierarchy in 10 years at all, because that is simply not the way that we're going to be interacting with content. That said, the template hierarchy as it is now, it makes it very easy for people to understand how to display content in the PHP template, which is really important, especially because WordPress is the gateway people use to get into web development. And this methodology of thinking. So you have different types of content, and each type of content has its own template, and you can then silo down into very specific types of content and provide specific templates to those pieces of content is an important understanding, because that is how everything works on the web. So even if you use the REST API and you build some sort of fancy JavaScript single page application thing, you're still doing the same type of approach where you're using templating and you're saying this type of content belongs to these files and these files generate that type of layout. So it's a really good way of introducing people into this way of thinking. It is getting really complex and detailed, and you often see people having trouble traversing the tree and figuring out what's going on. There are great plugins that solve that. You have all these plugins that you can install that reveal to you which templates are currently in use. And I find them tremendously useful, especially when teaching people how to build templates, because then you can see, you open any kind of view, and then you can immediately ask, what template am I currently using here? And then you can try to make a template and then see if that's the one that kicks in at the right time, so that you can control the content. But yeah, it's an interesting little quirk in WordPress that actually does good. So.
Yeah, the other thing I was going to, what Sally said about, very popular third-party plugins that have their own theme, their own template structure in them, for understandable reasons, she converts to filters, which goes back to the internal argument of either use native WordPress or use a framework like Genesis. But I'm not going to go down that road, folks, because that's a rabbit hat. So, Adam, what's your thoughts about this? Have you got any? Because it's a little bit outside your interest, really, isn't it, Adam?
Actually, you are wrong. It is inside my interest.
Right.
Yes, but see, not like how you guys do it. So, I'm not going to go exact. I want things to be easy. and creating a file and naming it whatever.php and putting a bunch of code in it, not going to be easy for me. It might be easy for you guys. It ain't going to be easy for me. However, I am going down this road of custom post types, custom fields, relationships, and also creating the templates. But I think I'm doing it the easier way, the way that the actual people that use WordPress can do, because I'm not a developer. I'll be the first to say that. And so not to shift the direction of the conversation, but my stack right now is I'm using something called Pods. I don't know if any of you, I mentioned Pods a couple weeks ago, and what Pods makes it, and I'm actually starting to release videos on Pods. I just released a video on Pods. I got a new one coming out
very
today.
good. I watched your latest one. It was very excellent.
Yeah, and this new one's going to teach anyone how to do more advanced stuff with creating custom post types and then establishing the relationships with them. Now, that's really easy to do with Pods and the custom fields and all that. And I'm doing some really advanced relationship stuff on my website right now. But then the challenge is to everybody else is how do you make it look pretty on the front end? And the solution to that is
Gutenberg.
Heck no. No, that's a good one though. No, I think I might have mentioned this a couple of weeks ago as well, and some of you guys are familiar with it. It's that new product that was released a month ago called Beaver Themer. So if you are someone that uses a page builder called Beaver Builder, you pay a little extra money, you get this thing called Beaver Themer. So you can create these using a page builder, you can create these archive templates, 404 templates, taxonomy templates, single post templates, and you can dynamically assign it to content. So now you don't have to pay as much attention to this hierarchy because you're now just doing it visually, and it kind of opens it up to anyone to be able to do these kinds of things. So for me, I don't really get into the nitty gritty of the hierarchy because I'm not creating a static file. I'm going to use a tool that makes it visual for me to create these things. And what's very powerful is the maturity of these tools where you can now actually use a product like Beaver Themer, and I can do the most amazing things with it because it's all visual and drag and drop, and I don't have to write a line of code at all. Literally, I do not have to write a line of code. Perfectly integrates with advanced custom fields or pods, and it is so easy to implement. So for the non-developer, there are great tools where you can leverage custom post types and do some really amazing things that I don't think really WordPress was designed to do in the first place, which is, creating some content outside of a post or a page. Now it's really easy for the average person to do, and that's what I'm going down the road with my sorry, I'm going down that road with my videos, but this could actually tie into what the first story. Oh no, we didn't get into that story. I wanted to hash this out with the John and Jonathan and Morton and the girls here. The whole is the market WordPress shrinking and not enough leads. That's the one. That's the story. Wait,
that was last week. So,
that was last week? Oh my gosh, I totally missed out.
Well, there you go.
I'm a week behind. I shouldn't have moved last week.
Anyways, I'm a year behind, Adam, so don't worry.
Let me just tie back into the point with that. If you're developing websites or you're a developer, whatever, you got to start learning how to do these things. If you're going to be able to create more advanced things outside of a brochure website, you got to learn this stuff, whether it be through writing some PHP or using some of these easy tools. You've got to learn this stuff.
Well, actually,
so that you can get your deals.
I do know an extensive course, video course, and I know a guy that's actually developed a lot of courses. So you might, I would suggest you go on to lynda.com, actually, Adam. But there we go. I think you just seen an example, folks, of because you got Morton's observation about Gutenberg and about you need testing, but then you got the dynamics of the third-party world of these page builders, and they're really driving express speed functionality at a breathtaking pace. What did you think about this, John?
Well, I definitely agree with Morton that the future of WordPress and, in general, web development is going to be where you input data one place and it ports out to several places. That's just where web development in general is going. And
isn't that kind of the definition of a content management system anyway?
It kind of is, yes, definitely. But for now, definitely there are a lot of different ways to interact with WordPress. The traditional way that you build a theme, though, is through the templating system. For a little while longer, that is going to hold sway. It is important to, understand it, and the Codex offers a good understanding of that. If there's nothing else there, then it's going to revert to the index, .php file. But there's many different ways that you can create a page, a specific page, whether it's a specific archive, a specific page template, or a single post or a single post type. And one of the things that we saw a few years ago, like about 5 or 6 years ago, was the introduction of post types. And that is really what moved WordPress from being a blogging platform to a true content management system, was the introduction of post types. Now that we have the REST API and people are using WordPress as a headless CMS in some cases, we're going to see more and more of that as time goes on. So, definitely, I think that is the way of the future. But again, people interact with WordPress in so many different ways. With Adam, he uses Beaver Builder. I know Lee Jackson, same thing. With Beaver Themer, you can set up visual templates that you can reuse as well. There's for some people working with a page builder, whether it's through a theme forest theme or Beaver Builder or Elementor, that's how they interact with it. So it's very interesting times.
It's really very dynamic, isn't it, John? It's when you're outside viewing it, you really don't know where all this is going to go, because like what Morten said about the RESTless API, I just saw it as a way of complicated applications being built to a higher standard in using WordPress. What I hope doesn't happen is like it encourages a MySpace kind of scenario, because that didn't end very well, did it? But time will tell, won't it? So, Morten, what would you advise somebody that is just getting into WordPress and they're trying to improve their development skills? Is learning the hierarchy of the template really still very important? Because you got this like pods and these page builders, kind of a separate development way almost, aren't they? Or what do you think? Help out, Morten. Give me light.
If you're going to learn WordPress, you need to learn WordPress first.
Yeah,
it's that simple. Like this is core WordPress development. The template hierarchy helps you understand how WordPress handles content. So more than just saying it's a way of shunting the display of content down into the right silo and getting the templates to work, it tells you how WordPress understands the content you put into it. So investing time in understanding the template hierarchy, even if, like I said, it's going to go away, is still worthwhile simply to get a better understanding of how WordPress puts itself together and how WordPress handles data. Because down the road, you will eventually build something like the template hierarchy anyway. As for the success or failure or future of things like page builders, Gutenberg is specifically designed to do away with the page builder marketplace, I think, in a very real sense. If you combine Gutenberg with the REST API and new layout features like CSS Grid, you basically have a situation where pretty much everything that we've been doing in terms of page building and custom layouts and everything is going to change in a very fundamental way over the next couple of years. So these companies that are currently shipping page builders have to figure out a way of either adopting what is happening in WordPress core and new web technologies to add on to the experience, or they have to start figuring out new business models, because the second WordPress core allows you to drag and drop content into whatever region you want using CSS Grid and making it super flexible and responsive. There's no need for a page builder anymore, because that's what WordPress becomes. And that is the end game of Gutenberg. So next iteration of Gutenberg will have features like the ability to control what's going on in widgets, and then eventually it'll just be the whole page. So it's and then you get this whole idea of like if Gutenberg allows you to create custom templates, then you don't need custom post types the way you do now, unless you want to segment content off into different silos. It means that the way that we now think about custom fields changes, because a custom field is really just a block unless you want to be able to query that field content specifically from outside the post. So there are a lot of different things that are happening at the same time that are coming together to create this new environment where a lot of things will change very, very quickly. And anyone coming into WordPress today should then therefore focus on the basics, understand how WordPress itself works, understand how WordPress itself handles content, understand how the template hierarchy currently exists, because and 6 months to a year, all of this will become the basis for the way you do things moving forward.
Yeah, I didn't realise that was the end game. Actually, I listened to your knowledge intently, but I actually wondered if it's a really good idea. But it doesn't really matter now because it's all been set, the pathway. But you've put that very clearly. It was a bigger plan than I thought. I thought that the improvements were to improve just how you move internal structures in posts and pages, not to compete outright with the page builders and other things. But thanks for that input. So it'd be really interesting to see what's going to happen in the next 6 months, like you say.
Yes, I have a feeling that, it's not the people like Beaver Builder that, WordPress core is really competing with. They will kind of be incidental casualties, but the competition is Wix and Squarespace and those people, and they have page building kinds of environments, and WordPress is inevitably going to move that way. Now I think tools like the Beaver Themer, we're having a demonstration of that at Sunday's meetup, and I'm looking forward to seeing it. I think that one thing to be aware of is that's the kind of tool where if you're a sort of WordPress implementer, if you are an agency, it may be something that's very time-saving. But having a tool doesn't make you a designer. And designing a theme is actually not that easy. The thing that I've always felt very cautious about page builders is that it seems like an opportunity for your clients to, to turn the website you just spent a lot of your time and their money making look good into GeoCities.
Well, I think that's a great point, actually, saying that's the only input I would give to you, Adam, is that sometimes you underplay because you've got quite a good eye for design, Adam. So when you're knocking around with these page builders, you end up with some decent looking stuff. But I know lots of clients, and Sally's just remarks about it, when they knock around something, they end up with a load of crap. That's
right.
The best practice is when you actually ship it, you can restrict what the client actually has access to do to those designs, so they can only change the content maybe via a custom field. Or if you talk to Lee's got it down, like the process down pat, where they can only change some words. Yes, so they can't screw it up.
Right. This is an important feature, but again, that is only going to apply if there's somebody who knows what they're doing, that's building the site, that uses this, versus having having clients buy it and use it themselves. Mm-hmm. But I think the other thing is, one of the reasons that clients struggle is that they're accustomed to something like Microsoft Word, not to something where, and they usually can't use Microsoft Word very effectively, right? They don't know, they just like make the text bigger and bold instead of applying styles and a lot of other things. Don't understand sort of outlining or any of that. Part of the point of having a content management system is exactly what John said before. You input things here, and then you can display them here and here and here and here. And if you're just setting something up so that you just have a completely new design every time you have a page, then getting to that content from somewhere else is really pretty difficult. And so I think that, anybody who, it doesn't necessarily have to be everybody who uses tools like Beaver Themer or like whatever ends up being, built into WordPress core eventually, but the people who create it still need to think about, right, why do custom post types exist? Why do, this is about information architecture and content strategy, and not simply, kind of creating a bunch of different randomness. I mean, clearly Adam has thought stuff out very well about how I not only want to create these things, I want to create relationships between them. And most of my clients are not thinking about anything like that at all. Not remotely about how is my content structured, how do things relate to each other, how do I break these things down and describe them, and yet all of that stuff is important, not just for the usability and navigability of your site, but also for your SEO. So, it's trying to figure out how to create that stuff so that it can happen without people's, I don't think you're ever going to get to a point where people can't have any awareness or understanding at all and still build a site of any complexity. I think they have to be willing to take the time to figure out and understand some kind of content strategy and information architecture. And what we want then is to make it as easy as possible for them to build. Because frankly, if somebody has a brochure website these days, I wouldn't recommend that they build it in WordPress. If you've got 5 pages and you're never going to edit them, go ahead and go to Wix or just have somebody build it in HTML. You've got less maintenance overhead.
And security, actually, we were talking, we had a great interview on Wednesday. And for security reasons, maybe you'd be better off doing that. I'm going to let Kim. So, Kim, you've been a bit quiet, haven't you? We've got any final insights about the conversation? It's gone a different direction than I thought it would go, but it's been fantastic, though, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been really interesting. For me, it was super critical when I was learning WordPress, and I actually was doing more of the development. And it was that informational structure just helped me understand, because my background was more structured data kind of stuff before I worked with it. But now with what I do with my end users and stuff, it's something that I very, very rarely revisit. And they're purposely not trying to learn WordPress from a development standpoint. They're people who want to have a blog type thing, or they had a developer build a site for them and they want to add their blog posts, but they're not even trying to learn that next level. And so it's not something I've revisited much recently.
No, but it's been a fascinating conversation. Mm-hmm. Before we wrap it up, folks, I just want to say that we've had a couple of reviews on iTunes, and they've been really, really nice reviews. Thank you so much for the listeners and viewers of this, saying that they've enjoyed the round tables the most. But they said they liked the interviews, and they like the guests, the panel, and the ladies that join us. We and John have actively tried to get a diverse panel as much as possible, and I think we've achieved that. And I've really enjoyed the discussion. So I'm going to let the panel say how you can find out more about them and contact them. And I'm going to start with Sally. How can people get hold of you, Sally? Oops, somebody already does.
Yes, clearly people haven't gotten the message that they shouldn't get hold of me by phone when I'm on this call every week.
Is that a landline?
Yes, that's my actual landline.
I don't even know what that is.
It's the phone I use most. I still have a prepaid dumb phone.
Wow.
Anyway, so yeah, the telephone, don't do it. WPFangirl.com. I am at Sally Getch on Twitter, and if you can spell my name, you can find me everywhere. There's only one of me on the entire internet.
Oh, that's great. Adam, how can people get hold of you?
Just visit me at WPCrafter.com, and got a contact form if you ever want to ask me anything. If you leave a comment on any of my videos, I do actually respond to every single comment, and I'm on Twitter as well.
I don't know how he does it, but he does. I don't know how he does it. Kim, how can people get hold of you?
On Twitter, I'm at Kim Shivler, or you can visit me at White Glove Web Training, and there you can get my contact form, email, links to the YouTube channels, etc.
Oh, and I'd like to mention, Kim, that Lee Jackson is holidaying in Florida right now. He actually contacted me. He's sampling some drink and on the poolside, actually. He's roughing it, isn't he?
Nice.
Yes. Morton, how can people get hold of you?
I am Morton on Twitter. That's MOR10 for those counting.
I just love it when you just say that. I am Morton.
But there's another Morton on Twitter that spells his name the way I do, except not with a 10 but TEM at the end. And we have interesting conversations about people confusing us. And you can find all my content on LinkedIn Learning, And you can find my blog at more10.com.
Oh, that's great. Thanks for joining us. It's been fantastic. And John, how can people get a hold of you?
You can find me at my website, which is lockdowndesign.com. You can also follow me on Twitter, lockdown_, or follow my Facebook page, Lockdown Design. How do we get a hold of you, Jonathan?
That was quite easy, folks. You can either get me on Twitter at Jonathan Denwood. You can post some stuff on the Facebook page, trying to be a bit more active there. Or you can just email me at jonathan@wp-tonic.com with any suggestions or feedback. It's most welcome. Me and John are always delighted when we get feedback, good or bad. It's great, isn't it, John? So we're going to wrap up this show for the podcast. We're probably going to keep the recording going because last week we had a better discussion after the freaking podcast than before it, I felt. But we're going to wrap this show up, folks, and we'll see you next Friday for another WP-Tonic Roundtable. See you soon. Bye. Well, there. That went a different direction I thought it was going to go, didn't it?
Where did you think it was going to go?
I'm confused.
Well, we kind of discussed the page builders a bit more than I thought, actually. But I suppose your points, Morton, is that it sounds like everything's up in the air, really, for the next 6 months, and nobody really knows. Well, you've clearly, obviously you're involved in that, the developer element of core and that much more than what we are. So that is the plan, isn't it, Morton? The ship goes that direction.
Oh, yes. No.
Don't you think it's going to end up being like the customizer, though, where you don't have to use the customizer for anything? You could stick to what you're used to. You have multiple ways of doing the same thing, which in itself makes things complicated as well, where there's this easing into thing. You think it's going to be this or that?
It's just not going to be possible to sustain that, because there isn't a way to move blocks of stuff around.
No, it's going to be the new editor. Someone will ship a plugin that reintroduces the old Tiny MCE editor for sure, but WordPress core will have some form of block editing Gutenberg type thing, because the future of WordPress is now completely hedged on this block editing modality being what people want, which you
don't know, which is your point. You don't know what people, they don't know what people want. No one actually knows what people want because that work wasn't done up front, which is great insight. Because
we don't have any telemetry on WordPress users.
Right. Wasn't there already a plugin?
No, it's all good stuff, Morton, isn't it? He doesn't kind of go with the flow.
Wasn't there already at the end of that article, I thought someone posted a link that someone had already developed a plugin to back Gutenberg out of core when they do it.
Oh yeah, it's standard WordPress fare, right? Anytime a major change to core happens, someone ships a plugin immediately. That just kills it. So, but it unlike the other things, I think this one will have a dramatic impact on end users, because if you choose to install a plugin that kills Gutenberg, you're also choosing to then stall your experience of WordPress at whatever time Gutenberg was introduced. So the future will just never happen for you. I can see a lot of developers doing this in an attempt to protect their clients from the future, and it's going to lead to a Windows XP type situation where WordPress will evolve and backwards compat will be locked at whatever point Gutenberg was introduced. And then if some issue later arises, all these people who refuse to update will then get stuck because they haven't updated, and making the update at that point will result in everything changing very dramatically. So I think our job as the WordPress community now is to fully inform every single person who uses WordPress about this thing, what is happening, that it's happening, whether you like it or not, and invest time in understanding it, because the standard approach, which is to resist, does not work here. It is counterproductive to the community. It's counterproductive to the people who use it. A much better way forward is to actively contribute, find every single issue, document it carefully, put it on the internet, make sure that the Gutenberg team is aware of it, and just help it be a better solution. So go test it aggressively. Write blog posts about it and put the blog posts on Twitter to make sure people read them.
Two things that what you're saying is...
Or do some videos about it.
Yeah, whatever. Just document what you're doing.
Two things I totally agree with what you're saying. We're faced with both a challenge and an opportunity. The challenge is that depending on how many clients each person has, they could have, dozens. You're going to have to go educate them about what's happening, because if they're actively using it, actively updating, should be, or you should be, helping them do that. They're going to need to know what to expect, and like, hey, what's this? How come it's all different now? They're going to need to know that. And, that's the challenge, but also the opportunity, because it's education, an opportunity to work closely with clients and educate them about what's happening and answer any questions that they're going to have once this ships in 5.0 or whenever it drops. So,
would this be the most dramatic change that has ever occurred with WordPress? Because think about it, how are they going to make this thing backwards compatible? Wouldn't they have to convert existing content into blocks?
It's not going to be. It's not going to be. This is the first breaking change that will ship with WordPress.
And so it's going to, meaning there's going to be an upgrade path, correct? Or no?
So what happens is, if you look at how Gutenberg works now, when you author content, so in the content blob, it inserts comments before and after each block that are then parsed internally. So these comments will then sit in the blocks, in the content blobs, meaning the expected behavior of the content will be tied to the ability of WordPress to parse the comments. So any content that's written using Gutenberg has additional information in it that doesn't exist for other posts, which means if you revert back to an earlier version of WordPress, the content will just be parsed the way it is without deference to these comments, which means that the behavior of the blocks is removed, which will in turn produce a non-standard and non-expected experience. So it's not like installing Gutenberg, creating content, and then uninstalling it destroys anything. However, it does change the behavior of your content in a significant way. And it's a non-transparent change. So you don't understand why it's not working anymore. There's no clear indication of what's going on because of how it's marked up. Now, exactly how that works will probably change. I don't think that the comments hinting is the right way to do this. So hopefully there'll be something more complicated, probably with the data attribute or something like that. But even if that happens, you still have the same problem, which is older versions of WordPress simply won't understand this type of content. So, and then, the next iteration of this will include probably the customizer or some other layout tool, in which place we're now talking about things that aren't currently possible in WordPress that will require changes of how the database is handled, which will mean backwards compatibility just collapses on itself.
So this means like when this drops in core, every site that is updated, well, first you're going to need to anticipate what's actually going to happen to the content.
Well, nothing happens to existing content.
Okay, so it's just new content. You can't revert. Okay.
Yeah. It seems to me like it's going to be a gold mine, trying to, for anyone that does support, or a nightmare, depending on how you look at it, but definitely a money boom. And anyone that wants to get into developing plugins, basically, the playing field gets leveled out. Everyone starts again at zero. So yeah, I think there's a big opportunity awaiting people there as well.
Yeah, and there's a huge opportunity for a lot of plugin shops and theme shops who have been waiting for a reason to totally refactor everything they're doing to do that now. Because when, in many cases, refactoring a plugin or the behavior of a theme or something like that automatically incurs this debt of having to explain to the end user, oh, I changed this, and now everything is different and you need to learn it. And introducing that change as in, WordPress has changed. We need to change to keep with the program is a much cleaner way of doing it. It's almost like when Apple changed infrastructure, right? They went from PowerPC to Intel, and they were like, oh, you have old software? Good for you. Now go buy new software, right? That is what essentially is happening. Not as an extreme way, but it's a similar analogy.
So
okay, I have to leave. Sorry.
Okay. Oh, thank you for being
Thanks
here,
so
Martin.
much for joining us,
Yeah.
Morten.
Have a great weekend, everyone.
Oh,
Thank you, Morten.
Bye.
Thank you.
Essentially, what I think he's saying is if the plugin authors refactor and they sync it up with WordPress changing,
It will
It's
be
not-
less painful for
it's not
their,
them doing it.
Right,
It's
you have- you're right, you
WordPress
can-
doing it.
totally blame it on something else.
Exactly.
Yes, no, I did not just decide to make your life harder because I realized that my original code was a mess of spaghetti and had to be fixed.
Yeah. But I mean, realize though that anybody who has a WordPress site, it doesn't matter whether it's a plugin or a page builder or a theme or WordPress core, the way that they perceive it is it's all WordPress.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So true.
Well, isn't that why Pippin Williamson started his rant and investigation about page builders? Is because he kept getting support requests about Restrict Content Pro.
Yeah.
And you know how it worked or didn't work with different page builders.
Most people only experience their site. They're not like us. They don't build like 20 sites a year. So, you know, to them, they might have like their site, maybe site. So to them, that's all they know about WordPress.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, but I think the just to finish off, and then I'll switch everything off. It's a bit like we were talking to a client, weren't we, John? And the actual back-end interface, I think, needs more flexibility. It's like when you end up with an enormous amount of templates, can't you? And it'd be nice to have some way to order them and that type of thing. And the media library, that's got a bit clunky, hasn't it? You know, that needs sorting out. There's a few things that need sorting out, isn't there, John?
Well, and again, like when you're dealing with complexity, I mean, a website can be anything from
5 pages to 1,000, can't it?
Yeah, so I mean, there's going to be varying levels of complexity. There just is. But I think that WordPress in general, I think that these changes are going to be more long-lasting than the post formats were.
Yeah. Because
Tumblr was like one site, and their competitors, who they're going against now, Wix, Weebly, Squarespace, they are not going away, and they are a whole group of sites, and that is like what they're trying to do, is to make the experience more like that. And it's not just those either; it's other sites as well, where drag and drop is the norm, and that's how people expect a website to be edited. So,
yeah. All right, I'm going to finish the live show, folks. Thanks for being our audience, and hopefully you enjoyed the podcast and this additional bonus content. And we'll see you next week, folks. See you later, folks. Bye.
see ya.
Bye.
Get your dose.
Yeah, get your dose.